Hey, Pro Organizers. My name is Melissa Klug, and you are listening to the Pro Organizer Studio podcast. Professional organizing changed my entire life. After 20 years of working at huge companies, I started working for myself. I opened a professional organizing business, grew it to six figures, and I never looked back. Now I get to spend all day, every day, teaching organizers around the world how to find clients, how to market and sell yourselves, how to turn this business into what you want it to be. Whether you have been in business for 15 minutes or 15 years, you have a home at Pro Organizer Studio. I'm excited that you're here. Let's get started. Hey, Pro Organizers, it's Melissa, and I am here with a podcast that I've actually wanted to do for a long time. And I found the perfect person to talk about it with, my friend Kim. She's been on the podcast several times, but we are talking about something that is really, really important to chat about, that we are starting to hear more about out in the greater world, in the news, is menopause and perimenopause and postmenopause and all of those things. And it is still something that maybe some people are uncomfortable talking about, but because there are so many women in this industry, and because there may be things happening to you that you are like, oh, hey, I didn't know what this was. That's what happened to me. That's what happened to my guest, Kim. And so we just wanted to have a podcast about what you may be going through in your organizing business and not even realize it. Couple caveats. First of all, neither of us are doctors. We make people's underwear drawers very pretty. So obviously, this is not a substitute for any sort of actual medical information, in the same way that Instagram and TikTok are not substitutes for medical education. And the second thing is, I did record this a while ago. So even though, like today, when I am recording this intro, it is negative 14 degrees at my house. You are going to hear me in one section talk about air conditioning, and you might be like, well, I'm very confused. We recorded this a while ago. All right, I would like to reintroduce you to someone who gets so much love when she comes on the podcast. So I'm thrilled to have her back to talk about this. It's my friend Kim Snodgrass of Rustic Home Organizing in Oregon. Well, before we hit record, we were talking about, I couldn't make this up if I tried, chin hairs and
It's
gray eyebrow hairs, which really leads us like beautifully into this conversation. Kim, how are you?
I am good. Yeah, that we definitely kind of went down an interesting
Yeah.
path.
I have said this many times before, just depending on the guest, like when it's someone that I actually know in real life, like you, we should probably record the podcast before the podcast. That would probably be more popular than what we're actually talking.
You possibly maybe could have taken a few little bits and pieces from that.
Right. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I asked Kim to be here with me for a few reasons. One, she's delightful. Two, she and I talk offline about the subject quite a bit, and it's something that impacts organizers a lot. And also because your podcast episodes, people love hearing from you. So I decided it was time to have you back.
Yes, I'm excited to. This is great, and it's definitely a topic that you and I have covered a lot. And even though
Yes.
I'm not a doctor, I would love to just weigh in on what I have figured out, learned, and what you're experiencing.
What we were talking about today, and this might not be everybody's cup of tea, and that is okay. If you are not comfortable talking about this stuff, you can skip on and don't listen. But we're talking about perimenopause, menopause, and being an organizer and a business owner and all of those things and how they all interact together. And I actually love that we're talking about this because I believe that, and I've seen it with my kids for sure. I think this new generation of kids, and we both have kids in the same ish age category, they're a
Mhm.
lot more open about talking about things that impact us, like body stuff and all that kind of thing. Like, whereas we grew up a little bit more, you didn't talk about these things and they were private and they were buttoned up and no one talked about it.
It's
I
true.
think we're doing a much better job in talking about major things health wise that impact us. But some people are still like a little about talking about perimenopause, menopause, that type of thing. Have you seen that?
100%. And just to back up a little bit, I don't know if Michael, AKA Steve, is listening, but he might
Oh,
wanna just, like, fast forward to the next episode because this might not be for him.
Okay, so what Kim's talking about is we have it's a small number, but we have some men in our inspired organizer group. There was one of our inspired organizer members who is a dude, Michael Kwan. Hello, Michael. Um, who actually probably doesn't listen to this podcast, but at the How To Summit, he was there and got to know a bunch of people. And then he was on one of our live Zooms where we ended up talking about Kegels and all sorts of other things. And he was like, I don't know what's going on right now. So, anyway, but he's a good
Yes.
sport, which is great. But
Yeah.
yeah, but these are important things to talk about. And I know it might
Yeah.
feel uncomfortable, but like these are things everybody's dealing with it. But if we don't talk about it, we all think we're alone.
I agree. I do think for me, I've had to shift my thoughts of not so taboo as far as the menopause, perimenopause, and what all that means, but it's just almost, your body is just transitioning into a whole new phase. And there is no manual. There's no heads up. It's coming. It hits everybody differently. That is what I have learned. I know how it has hit me, but things that I suffer from, I can talk to somebody else that they're not feeling that, but they're feeling so many other things. But what I realized this last year is how much it was impacting my daily life and how I could operate and how it was affecting parts of my body that I was clueless on why they were doing what they were doing. And then after deep diving, doing lots of blood work, lots of doctor visits, figuring out what was causing a lot of it was shocking that something so simple as low estrogen and what it was doing to me as a whole. And I think I'm still struggling. And this statement is probably a little bolder than you wanted to dive into right away. But I think I am trying to wrap my head around is why we are so uncomfortable when our body is supposed to naturally be doing this. And
Yeah.
so for me, I'm trying to figure out, does this mean we're hitting this perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause stage in our life too soon? Is our body not ready for it? Is
Yeah.
it food? Is it environment? What is all of this? Because I have been so healthy my entire life.
Yeah.
And then all of the sudden to feel like a pile of dog poop
Yeah.
on a daily basis has really thrown me for a loop. And I think that there's more and more research being done, which is fantastic. I'm hoping that my girls don't have to suffer as long as I did. And I'm hoping they don't have to do some of the things that I'm doing. I hope that there's going to be advances or understanding of how to prevent some of this stuff.
One of the things when you talk about, is this just normal? Is it, or is it, is it happening earlier? Is it any of those things? I think the hard part with that is we don't really know. I mean, I'm sure doctors know, but we don't really know because our parents didn't talk about these things. Like
No.
it was not discussed. Like it's just really recently. And I think what I have seen is it is social media. Sometimes social media does good things. There have been some really good social media coverage of perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause. I mean, one of the resources that I personally recommend and use a lot is Dr. Mary Claire Haver, she's an OBGYN who specializes in menopause research. And one of the reasons I like her is because she is talking about how OBGYNs do not get trained
Mm-mm.
on menopause. Like I think her statistic was it was like 2 days of medical school or something about menopause. And she is just basically saying like, "Hey, we're not educated in this, and so we're letting women kind of suffer. It is a normal process, but there are things that we haven't been talking about." And so I think it's really important, and I think for someone like you and me, I've generally been pretty healthy too, but you start to feel like really bad and you think, "Oh my gosh, something major is
Yeah.
going on." Nope, it's actually something teeny tiny, like
Very tiny.
microscopic that
Yeah.
is impacting how I feel when I wake up, how I don't have as much energy at jobs, all that kind of thing.
My biggest eye-opening moment was when I was about to have my hands all sliced and diced again. Here, I was gonna do it September because my erosive arthritis diagnosis that I had, they said it was genetic, which from what I read, it is. But I was ready to have all 10 fingers cut open and cleaned out and stitched back up, which would have meant my business was gonna be put on hold for quite a bit
Yeah.
of time. It's a 6-week recovery. And again,
And your life.
yeah, and cutting open your fingers, they were huge, I could barely move them. I was struggling working, I was getting the cysts on all the fingers again, And for about the 6th time in the year, I went back to the doctor and just said, can we just relook at all of my blood?" And it's when we realized that my estrogen had plummeted. But then you start deep diving into estrogen is what protects our joints, and
Yeah.
it gives this little armor to them. And when I lost my estrogen, I lost my armor to my joints. So then my genetic arthritis attacked them. And so as soon as I went on the estrogen patch, which was a very difficult decision for me, and
Yep.
I know this is hard for everybody with hormone replacement therapy because I do have breast cancer in my family and it was something we wanted to stay away from. But my body was like, things were terrible were happening to it. Anyway, fast forward 2 months, my swelling's down, my cysts are gone, and my joints are fine. And they're not
Yeah.
100%, but it's not understanding, I think, how menopause can affect the loss of certain hormones, how it can affect other parts of our body that we wouldn't think it's tied to. I wouldn't have thought
Yeah.
that my arthritis was tied to loss of estrogen. I would have no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I for sure until I started really realizing what like I'm in perimenopause, and when I started to realize that, I was like, "Oh, this explains things." Like after I started reading about all the things that can happen, I'm like, "Oh, this explains a lot of things for me." But if you don't know that it's going on, you start to feel like, "I think I might be I'm either breaking down or I'm going crazy or all of the above." That's at least how I felt. I was like, "Why am I full of rage for no reason?" And then I talked
Yeah,
to a
and
friend who's a
see
little older than I am, and she's like, "'Cause perimenopause." I'm like, "Pardon?"
excuse me? Which is funny because I didn't have the emotions. I was
Right,
not
that's the thing is
angry.
everybody's so different.
I
Right.
wasn't sad. And so I just was having this arthritis and severe hot flashes.
Right.
Severe, but it wasn't just a hot flash. So mine were a progression of a quick anxiety attack that would
Mhm.
last about 30 seconds. I couldn't describe it. It would be a fight or flight feeling and like something, what just happened? Like the universe just like some sort of weird shift just happened because
Yeah.
I was fine 3 seconds ago. And then my heart rate would spike. And at times, and I've even recorded it on my watch to show the doctor, it would spike from like a 72 to 170.
Oh,
So
that's
then I would
really
want
high.
to that's an extremely high heart rate. I mean, that's like
Yes.
high cardio impact
Yeah, that's like
heart rate
running an ultra
for me.
marathon at a
Yeah.
sprint.
And then it would be, I'm gonna throw up,
Mhm,
and then a couple minutes later, the sweat would pour out,
mhm,
and then it would be over. But I
mhm.
was having those 15 to 20 a day, and I couldn't
That's a
function.
lot. That's a lot.
I couldn't I was struggling at jobs. I would panic if I went into somebody's house and there was no airflow. I mean, I would be like, "I don't know how I'm gonna be here all day long." And so I also wanna kinda talk about, little tricks that I've learned along the way in case anybody is going through that that's listening.
Oh, that's
But
great.
again, I suffered with those for a year, and I don't think I should have suffered that long, and I really did have to be an advocate for my own health. I had to really, really, really push, even though I really like my doctor, and I see a naturopathic slash regular doctor. She does both. But I had to keep saying, "Something isn't right. Something isn't right." And it wasn't her that told me about the estrogen affecting my joints. It was me doing my research and then bringing it to her and her confirming it. So you
Right.
really do have to be an advocate for yourself, and not that Google can tell you the truth, but it can lead you to a few clues that might be happening, and then bring that to your doc. That really helped me a lot.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying too. It's just coincidental that we are recording this a day that a good friend of mine was like, "I'm having, XYZ problems." And according to Google, it's either this simple thing, she's like, or it might be cancer. And I'm like, don't go to Google for immediate medical advice. But there is now a lot more stuff about you do have to do, not every doctor is the right one for you.
Mhm.
And I think we have this idea, this is kind of a tangent, but I think we have this idea that like every doctor must just be like the best, smartest, best person. I have a
Yeah.
really good friend who is a medical, by the way, a lot of friends who are dear, dear friends who are doctors and wonderful doctors. This is not a doctor slam, but I had a friend who was in medical school, and I said to her, "Hey, how many people kinda, like, flame out first year? Like, how many people are not in your class anymore?" And she's like, "Oh, no one." She goes, "They make sure once you get in, they make sure you graduate." So she had a guy in her class who was
Oh,
on his 3rd time at his first
oh,
year. Well, that guy will be a doctor someday. So, it's just a message that if you don't feel like you're being listened to, if you don't feel like, that someone is really taking your care or your concerns seriously, you can find someone else and just say, "Is this really just like a second opinion on, hey, is this doctor telling me all the same things the first doctor? So maybe this seems right, or is there something
yeah.
else?"
No, no, that's very true. I think too, I think where I started to realize like something's got to give here is the amount of medication that kept getting prescribed to me to
Yeah.
cover up the symptoms. So the heart rate was a big concern because that's having those that many a day that's not good for your heart. So then I get put on beta blockers to slow to
Yeah.
slow my heart rate down and then I get put on this other drug that you can get from a compound pharmacy that they give to opioid addicts, but they give it to you in low doses, and this kinda helps with chronic pain, and,
Yeah.
I mean, at one point, I was taking, like, 6 to 10 pills throughout the day. This is
Yeah.
from somebody who took nothing her whole life to 6 to
Right.
10. I was like, "I can't do this. I
Yeah.
literally can't. I won't do this."
That's
And the
why.
estrogen patch took all of that away.
And you're right. These are all really personal decisions. And I know that, by
Mhm.
the way, this is obviously not medical advice because
Oh,
we
no.
make people's underwear drawers pretty. We are not doctors. But it is just being like, I really love what you said about being an advocate for yourself
Mhm.
because one of the things that, like I said, OBGYNs are sometimes a great place to go, but they might not be the right place for some things that you would think they would be. Sort of like how organizers always think realtors should be a great source of referrals for them, and in fact,
Oh,
they
yes.
you know what I mean? It's those things
Yes.
that, like, make sense, and you go like, "Well, I'm having this problem, it's an OBGYN problem, my OBGYN should be able to help me." Sometimes they're just not as well versed in it either, and so it's about finding someone that will listen to you and figure out, "Hey, is there a deeper problem here?" For you, it looked like this little estrogen patch that fixed a lot of other things,
Yeah,
but
which was crazy.
yeah, I'm very fortunate that I have an OBGYN who's the loveliest. She is one of my favorite people, and we found out during one of my pregnancies that we were born on the exact same day. I this year was like, I am going in to see her. Last year I didn't see her. I saw someone else, and I'm going in to see her because I know that she will know precisely what I am talking about because we are the same age. But then you also realize that, like, no, that's actually not true because your symptoms are wildly different than mine, which are
Mhm.
wildly different. Like, everybody has different stuff going on too. But
Right.
and that's hard too because, like, I have friends I talk about this with, and they're all, some of my friends are having tons of hot flashes. I'm lucky that I haven't had that yet, but I'm kinda hot all the time. That's different.
Yeah. Yes, it's definitely a difference, and my temperature did start to rise, I would say about 4 years before I really quick, I also learned in a book I was listening to, and I can't reference it off the top of my head, but I learned that the 3 phases of menopause, the perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. I learned that menopause is literally 1 day.
Yeah,
Which
right,
I thought was kinda cool, and I don't think
yeah,
everybody realizes that. So, basically, you're either perimenopause or you're postmenopause.
right.
Menopause is the day that you have your one-year anniversary, and
Your
we all
one-year
know what that one-year
anniversary of the what?
anniversary
Yeah,
is.
right,
So, yeah, just to anybody out there that's just entering this phase of this wonderful, magical world,
right.
you really have 2 areas, and what determines that is levels, whatever
Right.
those hormone levels are, and you
Which
can
is
go from
estrogen and testosterone, right? And
yeah, and then you're obviously going 1 year without a cycle
right.
brings you into that. Actually, I think that is technically, medically what determines your postmenopause,
It is, yes.
but along with that is these, plummeting levels of these hormones, and
And
that's
that's why I wanted to make sure that we were talking about perimenopause a lot because of the age range
yes,
that a lot of organizers fall in. And because I
exactly.
know, like me, I'm a pretty well read, educated person. Like, I know a lot of random things about a lot of things. And I was extremely uneducated about the length of time perimenopause could be, years.
Mhm.
It also can start way earlier than you think it does. So I think there's this number in our heads of like when you're in your 50s, these things start to happen.
Right.
No, it can actually perimenopause can start in your 30s. There's no rhyme or reason to what age it is. I believe it's a little bit genetically influenced by your mom,
Yeah, I think
but
so.
that isn't even always a good arbiter. And so if you are in your 30s, mid 30s and you're like, "Well, I'm not feeling quite the same as I used to." I know for me it I really kind of felt it at like
Mine
40-ish.
was 41. Mhm.
Yeah. You might not realize it, but you are probably in some stage of perimenopause when that estrogen starts to go down and you
Mhm.
might start feeling impacts. Like for me, I never had what people would call PMS ever. Totally fine. All of a sudden, I'd be like, wow, I just really want to kill everyone that I come in contact with, like including people I love very much. Like, what? I don't have any reason to. Like, I'm not being attacked. Nothing's happening to me. I'm like, why am I so upset all the time? And then I'd be like, oh, it's PMS. Well, wait, I've never had that before. These are all like little signs. And for me, it was also just feeling a lot more tired. And even when I got plenty of sleep, all those things, weight gain, which is my favorite, that's the best.
Such a joy.
Can't be more excited about that. But yeah, there are just a lot of different symptoms that you might go, "Hey, it's perimenopause." And I have friends now who, I have a group text with one set of friends where the other day this woman was complaining about XYZ symptoms and I'm like, "Just FYI, probably perimenopause."
Probably kind of know. Yeah,
Like, "What? What are you
exactly.
talking about?"
And looking back, I can see now when I started. That's how I know. I had my first little cyst pop up on my hand when I was 41, and it just kinda stayed dormant for
Mhm.
a lo like, about 5 years, before I had to do anything to it, but those were the beginning signs of it. Yeah, and, the lack of sleep, all of that, the whole thing really affects your daily life, and if
Yes.
you're running a business, I think to be prepared for it because it really does kind of throw a wrench into your plans. And there's a lot of diet and exercise that goes along with this, and I am not as educated in that. I have a friend of mine that really dives deep into that, and I do get information from her, and I don't do enough. I know I don't. I know I'm not doing enough of
I'm working on that right now. I had a very long doctor's appointment about that earlier this week. So,
Yeah,
yes.
I dabbled a little bit, but I was like, I just don't enjoy working out like I once did. It's something that I am consciously trying to change my mindset, but I'm not there yet. But there's just so much that goes along with it, and
Yeah.
what you think might not be a symptom could be a symptom, and definitely be an advocate for yourself.
What you said about just as organizer, first of all, organizing is a physical job. We all know that. And
Mhm.
just running a business in general, I don't care how big or small your your business is. Running a business takes a lot of work and energy and effort. And as your energy goes down, like I am a person who in, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I could have survived on 4 hours of sleep for a few nights a week. I mean, that's not good long term, right? But
No.
I had a huge project I was working on. It was no big deal. I could get 5 hours of sleep, function great the next day. And sometimes in entrepreneurship, you have those times where you're like, I have to work really late. I'm going to a client and then I have to bill them and blah, 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 all the things. Your energy does start to go down. And so you have to really protect that and you have to have a plan for that. And that's something that I'm personally
Mhm.
working through right now, but that's hard too. All of it's hard.
Yeah, and there are mornings and even afternoons where I just feel like crap.
Yeah,
I literally feel like I partied for the last 3 or 4 days hard.
right.
Um, and I don't nothing really was different. So that must be something internal going on, and that's also another thing that, I struggle with. Sometimes if I have a big job the night before, if I have a big job the next day, I'll start, like, worrying, "Oh gosh, am I gonna sleep? Am I gonna wake up tomorrow and feel okay?" And blah, and then you
Yeah.
just set yourself up for failure.
I have seen in myself in the years since I started my business, definitely because I started when I was 42. I definitely have seen like, I used to work 7 days a week, and it was no problem, like, it really didn't bother me. I have realized I can't do that anymore. That's not something that works for me, and I've had to
Yeah.
come to grips with that too.
Another thing that I recently was brought to my attention, and again, I'm not a doctor and I am not going to state anything that I know is overly factual, but I do see a pattern. So there is this big wave of all these late life ADHD
Yeah.
diagnosis in women, especially in women,
Yes.
not men. We're not hearing about the men. We're hearing
No,
about
because they get diagnosed when they're kids.
I know. And again, I'm not gonna be able to state all of the facts because my brain doesn't remember things, and that's not menopause, that's just me. That's just my brain, so imagine it on menopause. Anyway, so apparently there is a connection between the loss of hormones and the intensity in which ADHD presents itself.
Interesting.
Yes. And the person that I talked to about this had done a deep dive into it and had a lot more of the clinical research. So I
Yeah.
probably should have written that down before we talked, but I didn't.
So
Which
this is
explains,
we're gonna call this podcast TikTok medicine because that's the same
yes,
thing as like
yeah,
any when you go on TikTok, I got TikTok diagnosed with ADHD. So that's what
exactly.
this is. This is not medical advice.
And, I got diagnosed almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
In fourth grade, my teacher basically told my mom, your kid's pretty jacked. And,
Okay, great.
back then, they didn't really do much for us, and mine wasn't the super hyper. I was just kind of like I just couldn't retain anything. I was talkative and blah, blah, blah. Anywho, so I was a stay-at-home mom most of my adult life, with the exception of some jobs here and there. It wasn't until I started this business that I realized, "Oh, crap. I really struggle at the computer. Oh, I really struggle, like, sitting here and understanding and comprehending and remembering, and, like, can you tell me that step one more time, or can you tell me that step 10 more times?" And so I ended up going to a ADHD clinic.
Mhm.
So my doctor doesn't treat me for it. I went to a clinic that is 100% all they treat is ADHD because I wanted to understand what our brains are doing with it,
Yeah,
not just give me a pill and send me on my way because I know
right.
that anyway, and I've already forgotten where I was going with
This
this.
is a great I was
Um,
excited. I was like, "Okay, I'm on the train."
I really dove in deep with the and it's a doctor that's all they treat though, which
Yeah,
I wish so much, and maybe we will get doctors that just treat menopause.
a single lane doctor.
100% treat menopause. But over the last 2 years of being on this medicine, we have had to really play around with types of medicine, time
Mhm.
of the day I take the medicine,
Oh,
quick
interesting.
release, fast release, because of the menopause phase of my life that I'm in and how it affects what I'm doing in my body on a daily basis. So she was talking about all of these TikTok
Yeah,
diagnosis
I'm
and
sure it
that
drives doctors insane.
it does because there is a true brain fog that comes
Yes,
with menopause, and
correct.
that can be confused with a true ADHD
Sure.
diagnosis.
Well, I think that's a good point though of like doctors haven't even figured some of this stuff out, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
like they making those connections for them. By the way, a doctor's job is so hard. Like having to make all these
I
connections
know.
between all the things like that seems
And
very
yeah,
stressful.
yeah.
And I would not be a good doctor. But that's really super interesting that you could have a symptom sort of like your arthritis that mimics like it can easily be something
Mhm.
else, but it's not. It's like a
Yeah.
canary in the coal mine or whatever. So
Yeah,
that's the right
and
phrase,
s
but
and so I do believe there are a lot of women in our age range right now that are being, quote, unquote, "diagnosed" with
yeah,
ADHD or ADD. I think it's just there is no in between. It just presents itself differently, and I
sure.
think they've stopped using one or the other terms. I think it's just one term now, maybe ADHD, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I highly recommend if anybody is out there thinking they have it and they have the TikTok diagnosis
Yeah.
head to a specialist. It is amazing. They talk about what your brain is doing, and it is so cool to learn,
Yeah.
and it helps me understand more how I work and how I operate and why I do the things I've done in the past and why some things are happening to me now.
I was just looking for the text you sent me. I don't think you'll mind me saying this, but you when we were trying to figure out when to tape this, you were like, "Wait, I have to make sure my meds have kicked in when I talk to
I
you."
I do. Yeah, I have
Right.
to. It's interesting in the IO group, so many people, it's more the younger ones, I think. I have this client with ADD and I
Yeah.
just, I want to make like, guys, we're not like this weird beast.
Right. Well, so we're
There's
gonna start talk.
different yeah, there's different levels of it, and
Yeah,
it presents itself differently, and it's not always that.
yeah.
But
This is, one of the as I like to talk about the hills I'll die on is now, we have seen a lot of people come into the group. I have a client who tells me she has ADHD. How do I work with her? And it's like, well, she could have 22 different kinds of ADHD. Like I have had clients with ADHD that present, and I know we've talked about this before, but I'm going to keep talking about it. ADHD presents a ton of different ways depending on the client. Some people
mhm,
become so hyper organized that they're over organized. Some people are the squirrel. Some people need things in clear bins, but some people want them hidden. It's all over the board. And my going in hypothesis for every organizer is you should assume that your client has ADHD until she tells you that she doesn't. Because that's what I'm seeing more and more. I had a consultation the other day and I just as she was talking to me, I sensed she was the kind of person that would be cool with this. I was like, "Do you mind me asking, have you been diagnosed with ADHD?" She's like, "Yeah, I totally have. How did you know?" And I'm like,
yeah, I will say in our industry, you can catch on to it pretty quick.
"Yeah."
Yeah,
And
definitely.
so figuring that out, we're gonna be talking a lot more about ADHD because I think it's really important for organizers to really figure out how to be flexible with their approach. But your point is it could be ADHD, it could just be menopause or perimenopause, it could be both, it could be
It
who
could
knows?
be a very dysfunctional marriage. It could be a
It could be
lot
a
it
lot
could
of
be a
things.
lot of things, but I definitely I will say I mean, I know you go in thinking everybody has it. I go in assuming nobody does. I'm just gonna treat everybody just where they need to be met at. So
Right. A and I don't even go in with like, "Oh, I assume you have an actual diagnosis." I just mean, I assume that right now, because of modern life, all the other things, all of the people that I'm helping have some degree. I personally, again, not a medical professional. I just think that the speed of modern life, phones, our attention span,
mhm,
all of those things are affecting all of us. And there might be, even if we don't have an actual diagnosis, I think we all just have the shortest attention spans ever.
I
And so we
agree.
can't keep our focus on, even if a client just doesn't want to organize their linen closet, it's because we can't focus on anything. And so I just am going to assume that I need to figure out how to make a plan that works for everyone, but I need to act as if everybody just probably has, again, either the TikTok or the actual diagnosis.
Right.
Everyone
Yes.
now.
It is,
But
definitely. So, yeah, so there's, menopause I have found totally has affected my arthritis. A new one. This is fun. This was a lot is in the last 6 weeks, and I didn't know what it was, to be honest with you, but my mouth is so incredibly dry
yeah, you told
that
me this.
yeah, that in the middle of the night, it's almost like I have to peel my gums from my teeth, and, it feels like
Oh,
my gums are gonna rip off and stay on my teeth. It's
this is a
so
very specific complaint.
it's horrific. It is so bad. I don't have bad breath, but I have incredibly dry mouth. It's the weirdest thing in the entire world. We all think we've had dry mouth until we have dry mouth, and
Interesting.
that is and again, I started looking it up, and estrogen affects your salivatory glands. It's uh,
Salivary.
salivary glands. Yes. So,
Seriously?
yeah. Again, my doctor didn't tell me this, but I
Fucking
deep dived
estrogen, man.
and gave a few different reasons. Like it could be because of medication. And I've been on my medication for 2 years. So I would have already figured that out.
Sure, yeah.
Um, and, and then it said low estrogen. So
Stop it.
yeah. So I have a dry
Crazy.
mouth spray that I carry around with me at clients' house so that I can actually speak to them when they want to because my mouth is so dry. Yeah. It's terrible.
Well, let's talk about clients. 'Cause okay, so I was at a client the other day, I actually put this on Instagram and many people chimed in. I was at a client who is an older man and his house is he just really doesn't like air conditioning. It's not a money thing, trust me, it's not a money thing. It is just he doesn't like air conditioning. His house always has the windows open and it was 155,000 degrees in there. And I was really proud of myself because I just flat out said, now I've worked with him for a long time. I have a good relationship with him. But I was like, "Hey, Bill, I'm gonna need to ask you, can I turn the air conditioning on? It's pretty toasty up here." He's like, "Oh, yeah, sure." He didn't care, but I was really proud of myself because every other time I've been there, the million times that I've been to his house, I have never, ever said a word, and I just have sweat myself silly. I had many people that responded and were like, "Oh my gosh, I hate when clients' houses are hot," that type of thing. But I was really proud of myself for speaking up for like, "Hey, this is what I need." And that might seem very tiny to you. For me, that's a big deal. I'm usually like, "This is fine."
I
But I had what are some things that you have had to do at clients to
yeah.
kind of, compensate for some of these things?
So the hot flashes, thank the Lord, have gone, almost away. I get I get a little bit of internal inferno, but I don't get the high heart rate as much. If I do, it's only like 110, not 170. I
Better.
don't, like, get beat red in the face anymore, and that's all because of being on the patch, but I still do get hot, and the year that I suffered with that, I it was a big thing. I like you, I wouldn't say anything because I didn't wanna make my clients uncomfortable because they obviously have the thermometer set where they want it.
Sure, yeah,
Um, but it was difficult, and I mean, it would be sometimes where you're literally watching the clock and not being able to concentrate almost on what you're doing or rushing it
yeah,
because you've got to get yourself outside. So for me, what I did, because again, I didn't speak up,
yeah,
which that's changed now. I do always ask for air ventilation, just a window open, something. I carried around a mini fan. It was a
mhm,
rechargeable mini fan and it had a little stand with it. It was like $10 on Amazon. And that saved my life. So when
mhm,
I got, like, super overheated, I could just hold it on me for a second. That was
mhm.
very, very helpful. I always made sure I had ice in my water, and I would guzzle that. I had no problem walking outside here or there for a few minutes. Now in the summertime, that was when it was 100 degrees outside, that didn't really
Didn't
help.
help. Right.
For me, I'm not a team, I'm a solo organizer, but I do have an assistant. And my assistant doing all of the loading back and forth, that saved my life. I would always switch my shoes midday
Okay.
because if you think about it, like, when you get really hot, they either say, like, "Cool your wrists, cool the
Yeah.
back of your neck, your ankles," and so our shoes get so hot, they're
Oh,
almost like
I've never thought
yeah,
about this.
they're almost like little heating pads. So they just
Oh,
hold that heat, and so midday, I would change my shoes, and that was a game changer.
interesting. I
Mhm.
never thought about that.
Changed my shoes and my socks. They were fresh, so they weren't, like, holding all this heat and
That's
moisture.
interesting because I live in such a cold place and we have foot warmers for the winter when we're outside. We need foot coolers.
Yeah, we need foot coolers for
I mean, I'm
sure.
sure we could probably just get like, yeah, that interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I never really thought about that.
Yeah, obviously, I would dress in layers. I didn't always love to wear a tank top at a client's house, but, uh, eventually, it would end up I would just have my work tank top on. The dry wicking yoga pants, I know there's a lot of organizers that don't think that's very professional, and maybe not, but the houses I'm working in, I usually have to come home and hop right in the shower. I'm not,
Yeah.
dealing in the same realm maybe as some, so I didn't have a problem wearing my yoga pants. And then for me, even though I was changing my shoes were flip-flops.
Yeah.
So just a flip-flop girl. And yeah, the heat is it's a thing in the
There
houses.
were I'll have to put links together, but when I was in Japan, it gets really, really hot in Japan in the summer, and they have, like, a ton of technology for trying to stay cool, and there was a thing I need to look into it, but it's like an ice ring you wear
Oh,
around your
oh,
neck.
yes. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, that
Yeah,
was the other thing I ordered.
yeah,
I ordered these really cute pink. They're like this size. I know if you're not watching it, I'm like putting my hands up and giving a
yeah.
size. I'd put and they're for, like, injuries, and they have,
Yeah.
like, the Velcro strap on them, but I would put
Yep.
those at the small of my back,
Yep.
and I would have a cooler in the car that would have an ice pack so I could swap it
You
out.
could switch it out. Yep.
Oh my gosh, that helps so much, and you can put that under your shirt so it's not even being seen.
Yeah, it's not visible, right.
Oh my gosh, that helps so much.
And well, for anything that you love, I'll totally link it in the show notes, like if you
Okay,
have
I do have
links
a
or
few
whatever.
go-tos,
Yeah,
especially that handheld fan because it's purse size, it fits in my tool bag, it can fit in
yeah,
my pocket, and the charge holds for a couple days, and I'm a big fan of that guy.
that's good. You're a big fan of the fan.
I'm a big fan. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just think that as much as possible for us to within the level of our comfort to just be upfront with clients about, "Hey, you're gonna get
Number
better
1.
work out of me if I can be cool." And by the way, this just goes for if you're even not in perimenopause or postmenopause. Like, making sure you're comfortable at a client is good for 100 different reasons. You're going to work better, all the things, but especially during this time, if you want to continue to work and be productive. Speaking up occasionally, I've I realize that that's a me problem, not a client problem. The clients aren't frustrated by it.
No, they aren't. And I know one way for like people like you and me who maybe don't want to be upfront about it. I've said this before, and this I used more to go towards having the space ready and set up, and dogs not sniffing my you know what all the
Right.
time. But sending an email a day or two before of
Yeah.
setting expectations and just saying, we work fast because we want you to get the most bang for your buck. If you could, have the house at 68, even if it's not that comfortable for you, it really helps us work so much more
Yeah.
or have a fan available, something like just stating what you need because the
Yeah.
client doesn't know. They're
Right. Yeah.
sitting there
They
at their
have no idea.
desk working or watching you, which drives me out of my mind.
I know that's your least favorite thing when someone watches you.
Can you please not watch me ever,
Yeah. Please leave
ever?
me alone.
I just, you know what? My work t-shirts are now going to say, I need you to stop watching.
I need you to please exit the space. Thank you very much.
Leave. Leave with your belongings.
No offense, get out.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good just way to just set the precedence. Not every client's gonna read it, but most of them will, and maybe if it's just set,
Yeah.
you just don't even have to have the conversation. Make your life
Or
easy.
even if you just have like, even if you don't wanna do a whole, expectation document, which I think is a great idea, you could just say, "Hey, just a couple of things for our session," and, if that's the kind of the
Yeah,
non-negotiable, just
just
give
yeah,
them a text a couple days beforehand saying, "Hey, just something that
y
people don't often think about, but it really helps us." Or you can literally just say to a person, "Hey, I'm just having a little bit of a medical thing. It's not a big deal, but, if we could take the temperature down, that would be great." There are a lot of ways you can say it. You don't have to, like, come out and scream at them
yeah,
if you're
because
not
really
comfortable.
working in a stuffy home is really uncomfortable. It's
I don't
so
care what
uncomfortable.
you have going on, it's the worst
Mhm.
for our work.
It really is. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
terrible. My hothouse client, the other day, I found I wasn't gonna be there for a super, super long time, so I didn't wanna go through the whole rigmarole, but I happened to find, like, one of their empty rooms had one of those vortex fans, and I'm like, "I'm not even
Plug
asking
that in.
permission. I'm just taking it. If he has questions, I'll answer them," but I'm like, I'm plugging that baby in, and it made it, like, a billion times better. So,
Mhm. I did start carrying in my car, and this even goes for winter time. We don't get as cold as Minnesota, but we do get cold
yeah,
here.
for
And
sure.
then people crank the heat. And
Yeah.
so now you're in a house that's 82 degrees and
Yep.
fake heat. Anyway, I did start carrying when Costco gets them in the Wuzu fans.
Yes.
They're the small little round guy. They're quiet, and they oscillate up, down, all around, and they have good power for just a small little guy, and I did
Yeah.
have that on one job because
Yeah.
I've gotta have some airflow.
Especially for longer ones. Are there any
Mhm.
other things that you have found, like, outside of the actual session, like sleep or food or anything like that? Anything else that you have found? You're further in the journey than I am, so
I will say there is a really big difference when you can get your protein in.
Mhm.
Having the protein helps your energy level, which you would think the carbs and all of that would, but I have found that, and I do think there is some backing behind this, that the higher protein meals throughout the day helps with that energy,
Mhm.
constant, not the ups and the downs. And so I always make sure when I am working that I have the high protein yogurt, chicken, like just protein stuff
Yeah.
that has definitely helped me a lot. Of course, they say no alcohol, but I can't tell you because I haven't tried that.
You're like, "I refuse to try out that
I
particular."
haven't tried that because I don't want to.
Yeah.
That's why. Yeah, but oh, another thing for the on jobs,
Yeah.
and this is for anybody that sweats, and it is a lifesaver. And I learned it from a client who was going through menopause. The AMB powder, you can get it on Amazon.
Oh, I
It's
don't even know what it is.
anti monkey butt.
Anti-monkey butt. Oh, I know what monkey butt is.
AMB powder, life changing.
Interesting.
You can put that in crevices from head to
Cracks and
toe,
crevices. Okay.
and it traps that sweat, and you don't feel it dripping down, and it's so great. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yep.
Only reason I know about monkey butt, boy, this podcast is really going a lot of direction. I know about monkey butt because we used to run, if you've ever heard of Ragnar. By the way, I don't run, I only drive. I was the support person, but there was this like 2-day,
Sounds
like,
like our hood to coast. Yeah.
yes, is a huge running race. I used to drive like my husband and all the people on our team, but there was one guy who was so obsessed with monkey butt. I mean, he was like constantly like one of our quote, we always kept a quote book from the weekend. And we're like, oh, Adam's putting monkey butt down his pants again. And it was just like, so that's the only reason I know what monkey butt is. But now I'm
Yes,
excited to know about
and
it.
yes, they also have a glide that is
Okay.
great, and yeah, for the areas that produce sweat a lot, I
Yeah.
highly recommend even double upping the glide and the powder.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good stuff. So, it's all about comfort.
My lower back on jobs is a sweaty mess.
You need the ice pack.
I know. I
Yeah.
know.
The
So
ice pack is amazing.
yeah, that's actually really smart. I honestly have never that's so silly because I get migraines a lot and I have multiple ice packs for my head, but I've never considered having one for like my waist or my back. That's really really
Mhm.
smart.
Yes, for
But
sure.
I just think giving yourself the grace of, so you and I are at different stages of this journey. I'm just a little bit younger than you are, not by very much. And again, that age range is widely
Yeah.
varying. It doesn't matter what age you are, but I'm still in perimenopause, which will last who knows how many years. I have found like giving myself the grace of, guess what? I can't do things exactly like I did 5
Mhm.
years ago or even a year ago. Like, I have to pivot and I have to be watching myself more carefully. Like, I have to be taking better care of myself. That's one thing I have realized is I haven't been doing a good job taking care of myself. And I think that's easy as an entrepreneur to
Oh,
just be like,
sure.
whatever, I don't need to go
Ab
for a walk today. I have too many things
Totally.
to do. No, I have to. And it's going to help keep me healthy to continue to organize and coach and do all the things.
For sure. I noticed that my balance isn't quite as what it
Yeah,
was.
same.
So I have to be a little bit more cautious when I'm going downstairs. I don't, whereas before I could carry like 6 or
Yeah.
7 boxes and not even see where I'm going. I will not do that now. I definitely am more cautious in carrying and where.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I actually thought about that earlier and I had forgotten to say it. I used to be the kind of person, and I still am. I'm the kind of person I like to say yes. I like to really help a client with things, even that might be outside of kind of technical job scope. But I had a client recently who, like 2 years ago, I would have been like, "Yeah, let's move that furniture from the attic. Let's go." And I flat out told
Do
her,
it.
I was like, "Babe, I really love you," and she's much younger than I am. And I go, "I adore you, but I can't do that kind of stuff anymore." I go, "Can you call your cousin, your neighbor, your whatever?" Like, I just am not gonna feel comfortable moving an armoire from the attic, whereas 2 years ago, I would have been like, "Yeah, let's go."
Do this. Yeah,
I
I
just
hear
have
you.
realized I don't wanna risk doing something stupid because I definitely am not the same,
Right.
and that's okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the menopause does take a toll on our bodies, and I think there's a lot of things that you can do to make it better that aren't all fun,
Right.
and that's for me, that's I know a lot of my problem right now physically, the strength is because I'm not working on it, and I
Yeah.
choose not to at the moment.
And that's where I am, and I had a
No.
little heartwarming moment this week with a
Heartwarming.
doctor that's
That's
like,
that's a great
"Girl,
way to put it.
you got." Yeah, so that's gonna be my new concentration is
Mm,
figuring some of that stuff out,
yeah.
but that's important too. So you've gotta work with people. I have finally declared defeat on some of my own problems and said, "I need to go to a doctor. I need a doctor to help me with these things," and
Mhm.
I just know that it's gonna be hard work that is worthwhile because I wanna be healthy moving
Yeah,
into the
yeah.
new decade. So,
And to all those ladies out there who sleep through the night, you're so fortunate, and if
enjoy
all
it.
of a sudden, like me, who for, like, 48 years slept like a baby, and then one night, you sleep for an hour and 15 minutes at a time. I
Yeah,
mean, for only maybe 2 or 3 sessions. That takes a toll on you too. Your body does slowly start to adjust. So there
yep,
is you will learn how to adapt to some of that loss of sleep. Unfortunately, the hormones didn't help that piece with me, so I still don't do the sleep thing, but allow yourself a nap,
yeah,
take a break with a
totally.
client, go close your eyes, like, you just gotta let yourself get a little bit of shut-eye here and there.
Yeah. Legitimately, I don't do it often, but if it's really, really necessary, I have 100%. By the way, go around the corner if you need drive your car around the corner if you need to. I
Mm,
have taken a 20-minute car nap
mhm,
just to get it's certainly not an enjoyable nap situation, but, like, getting even a tiny bit of quiet, and
mhm.
rest really can help in my experience. If you ever see an email from me or an Instagram post or whatever in the middle of the night, you're gonna know now why, because same thing, like, it's not mine's actually getting a little bit better,
Oh, that's
um,
good.
because we got a new bed. I also think that's part of it, but yeah, I
Cooling
we got a new
sheets.
bed, and
Okay. Yeah.
that has actually helped. Uh,
Okay. I got a cooling blanket. It's
mm,
actually like a comforter, cooling comforter.
mhm.
That was a game changer for a little bit of my comfort at night. It's the type that as soon as it hits air, it instantly gets cold. And when I
Oh,
say cold, I mean freezing cold.
interesting.
Yeah, and that is hands down my one of my favorite tools that I've gotten throughout this whole thing was that
Okay.
comforter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. So my brother is a medical researcher and he always sends me like the I mean, like legit, he is actually a doctor. I just play one on this podcast, but he sends me stuff occasionally that he finds and is really useful. And we have talked before about the cooling mattress toppers. Like they have them
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you can do that. They have cooling and heating. You can get one from for both sides so you're not like freezing out, someone that you sleep with. But there is a lot of legit science behind
There
some of
is.
these things.
I have the cooling pillow, the cooling pillowcase, the cooling sheets, and the cooling mattress topper
Yeah.
and or the mattress pad, and I have the cooling comforter. Out of all of those, the cooling comforter is the only one that actually gives me any sort of true quick relief.
Okay.
I will say that, and maybe I'm just not buying the right things in the other ones, but it all makes sense when says it's activated by air. Your mattress topper isn't getting the air, your pillow, your
Right.
head's on it, so it kinda makes sense to me. Your sheets aren't getting it because you've got the blanket over it, so it kind of
Yeah.
makes sense to me why it works so well. So if anybody wants to buy any of one out of all those, I say get the comforter for sure.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll
Yeah.
we'll link if you have good links, we'll put them in the
I
show
will try and
notes.
find the link to that one. It was a Costco purchase.
Oh, it might not work then.
I know. Anyway.
Well, but it just gives people an idea of
Yeah.
of what might be
Yeah.
out there. But I
Yeah.
just think I think what you've said is most important is being an advocate for yourself, whether that's at your doctor's office, whether that's with a client. You don't have to go into amazing depths of detail with people, but just be like, "Hey, I need XYZ." Take the breaks, be kind to yourself. One of the things that's been really good for me, and again, I don't know what, this might not work for everyone. It might not be something that fits with them, but I mentioned Dr. Mary Claire Haver, who is someone that I know a lot of women listen to. She has a book called The
Mhm.
Pause Life,
Mhm.
which I read and I really liked it. So if you just want more information, it's very comprehensive. She talks about all of the things. Like it's very holistic about pros and cons of HRT, pros and cons of, eating, all that kind of stuff. So that was one that I particularly connected with.
That's great. Yeah, I found one, and I'll have to look it up, that really talked about the hormones and understanding the difference, in the hormone replacement therapy and how research that was done X amount of years ago that
Yeah.
gave it such a bad rap, the research has changed as everything, and some of the validity in that research, and then just understanding the different types of hormone replacement,
Yeah.
bioidentical versus not, and your genetic makeup and how it's possibly gonna respond to those. There's just so much out there, but I think there is a lot of fluff too, so you definitely have to be careful, just like
Yeah.
picking a business coach,
Yeah. I,
which is something else we talked about, but you have to be careful that you're listening or reading the right information.
yeah. I think that, and without going down a rabbit hole of, this is not a political statement, it's not anything, but I think like when COVID happened and everybody started saying like, I'm doing my own research, and you're like, then we stopped listening to doctors and we stopped like, there's just a lot of stuff out there. And the one thing that I will just always remind people is figuring out what a legitimate source of information is. By the way, whether that is a business coach or a doctor or anything else, I think
Mhm.
there, because as we were joking earlier about TikTok diagnoses of ADHD, there is so much stuff out there that people speak very knowledgeably about something, and you're like, who are they? They're like, literally, I could go on TikTok and start talking about, menopause treatments.
Mhm.
I don't know anything, right?
And
Like,
but somebody might listen to you.
yeah, but just like check out who you're
Yeah.
talking to. That's why I personally connect with Dr. Haver, because she is a board certified OBGYN, and she talks about OBGYN education, how it's bad and all the like I don't know. I connect with her, you might not, but just make sure you're getting good sources of information and, actually going to doctors and all the things, whatever you feel comfortable with. But
For sure. Yep. And just, set yourself up for success in your own home.
yeah,
Make sure that you've got a fan close by. I have a fan in my kitchen window. So if I get hot doing dishes, I just turn it on, and
yeah.
I have flip flop slippers instead of closed toe slippers because I know my feet are going to get hot and then I'll get hot. Like, set yourself up for success. You don't have to suffer completely. And your
Yeah.
family's going to learn how to freeze. It's fine.
Yeah. So, you just reminded me. So when I was pregnant with my first kid, she was born in January, and I distinctly remember, it was like, at the end of when you're pregnant and you're just a furnace, and it was like January 8th, probably. It was freezing cold where we lived at the time, and I went to bed wearing shorts and a tank top, and I had a sheet over me. That was it. My husband was next to me in a hoodie, a thick hoodie with the hood all the way up, pulled tight. He had a hat under the hoodie. I can still see it. He had multiple comforters on, another blanket. I mean, he was freezing, and I was like, "It's so hot in here." And he's like, "What is going on?" And I told him not that long ago, I go, "Hey, buddy, do you remember that night in, Ohio when I was pregnant and you were freezing cold and I was really, really hot?" I go, "That is coming back for
Yep,
you."
we're coming, and it's gonna be for a long time.
Yeah, that window's gonna be open all winter, dude, so get
Yeah,
ready.
my favorite temperature is 58, so when it's 58 in here, I'm like, "Ah, this is."
Yeah, it's starting to get a little cooler here, probably same for you a little bit, and I am living for it. It's
Yeah,
great.
yeah, yep, for sure.
Is there anything that we did not talk about?
Probably, but not that I can think of off the top of my head. Again, just being an advocate for yourself and knowing that there could be some things going on in your body that are directly related to it, and talking to your doctor about it is, I think, and being persistent about before you do anything super drastic.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So we will put lots of resources, any links that Kim can find of things that she
Yes.
loves. I'll put links that
And
I find that
gadgets.
I love. We will put them in the show notes and on the blog and all the places. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining us. I love
of
talking to
course.
you.
Yeah, it's always fun.
That is a wrap on this week's Pro Organizer Studio podcast. I will see you next week. Have a great day, organizers.